What's up, Hoops Tribe? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Hoops. This is episode 13, and 13 is special to me because it's actually my dad's favorite number, and I'm a daddy's girl. I love both of my parents so much, but I give my dad credit for some of my favorite parts of my own personality, where I get my confidence from. He's always been my biggest cheerleader. He's always probably hype me up too much at times, like making me feel like I can do anything. Just that confidence, my ability to just go for the things that I want. If I have an idea, to just put it in motion, even when I'm scared, because it's not like I'm doing these things with no fear. I'm still scared, but I just do it anyway. And whatever happens, just happens. I get my entrepreneur spirit from him. So I just want to dedicate episode 13 to Papa Coach C. Thank you so much for everything that you've done with my life. With that said, I want to get into some WNBA headlines. And to kick it off, I'm going to start with the StudBudz, since I think it's relevant, since we're talking about dads, and Courtney Williams has this relationship with her dad. And he recently on a stream said that he was going to shut the whole Dave Portnoy conversation down. He was revoking his parental approval. And if you're unfamiliar, there was this whole thing where Courtney and Napheesa said on the stream that they were going to have Dave Portnoy on. Now, I don't think that they actually knew who Dave was, like for real, for real. He recently bigged them up. I think I saw it on a Fox article. So that in itself kind of shows you, what type of audience he has. But he's the owner of Barstool, and I think that's probably about all they knew. They may have heard little whispers about what Barstool has said about Angel Reese and how they basically trolled her online and been that media source that really highlights her lowlights and just continues that racial vitriol and that whole dynamic between her and Caitlin Clark. They've been one of the biggest pushers of that narrative. And that's about how much I knew about the guy. I didn't even know until all of this happened, his thoughts on rape and the things that he said about that and his usage of the N-word. So I genuinely think they did not know who this guy was and how detrimental he could have been to their stream. You may have seen my video about it, saying that they should probably talk to Keke Palmer, because Keke Palmer had a similar situation where she was about to bring Jonathan Majors onto her platform and the fans shut it down. So after they said that they were going to have him on the stream, fans kind of went crazy, and my video was just an advisor, like, okay, if you do this, just know what comes with it. But I think what's interesting to me in watching everything unfold and also being a content creator is the judgment that everyone is passing over them. Like, I understand being upset that they wanted the guy on the show in the first place, but I do empathize with just maybe not knowing who the guy was. Now, a lot of people are also upset with how Courtney has responded to the whole situation because, some of her responses were a little immature, like basically saying, the people that are trolling me the most about this are unattractive, or people that I wouldn't take a second look at, and the baddies are supporting me. And that was a weird way to respond. But then I also understand, like, wanting to be that hype person for yourself, because honestly, people on the internet are kind of nasty. So I don't know what kind of responses that she was seeing and getting from this whole situation from fans who were trying to advise her not to have the guy on the show. But now that or not Dave, because it's only been her dad who has said that they aren't going to do it. They haven't officially, from my knowledge, they haven't officially said they weren't going to do the conversation. Now that we have the idea that they're not going to do the conversation, I think fans should kind of just let it go. Because what I'm seeing online is that even when people try to correct themselves or, try to roll things back, people online are still very unforgiving. And I think we can't have it both ways. If we want to continue to be an influence over the people that we're watching, over content creators, we have to be forgiving and kind of let it go. Because, I mean, it's a situation where it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I've been seeing people say things like, oh, it's just a cop out or whatever. And it's just like, let people make mistakes and learn from it. It takes a lot of letting go of your ego to admit that you were wrong. And a lot of people don't have the capacity to do that. So I just think that it would be in the best interest for everyone to just give each other grace. Like just move on. Let's move on. So moving on, Sophie Cunningham was fined $500 over a TikTok. I'm gonna roll the clip. So after receiving the fine, Sophie responded in a tweet saying, this is funny to me. I don't think the TikTok was like I just don't think the TikTok was a smart thing to do. I don't think it helps her situation. Like calling the referees slow and dumb and useless is just, it's just nasty, Like y'all already know how I feel about the refs. Like I've made a recent post about how I think they have a tough job. Like I can criticize them all day, but to call them slow and useless, like that's just dehumanizing them to a certain extent. And I'm sure that she wouldn't like it if people call her slow or useless. Like honestly, I think she's a bit mediocre. So I just feel like Sophie gotta chill. Like $500 ain't nothing though. So I'm sure she has not learned her lessons and she probably do it again. Moving on, Angel Reese is just one tech away from suspension. At this point, I think they just don't want her to say anything. I think they just want her to stop talking. From what I saw with the last take, it was between her and Diamond Miller. Like the words weren't even directed at the referee. And it just shows the stark difference in how refs referee the NBA versus the WNBA. I don't think a tech would ever be called in that kind of situation because I've just heard, and I always refer back to Kevin Durant because I've heard Kevin Durant say the craziest thing on the free throw line. It's just a different level of trash talk. And I don't know if it's, well, I do know. I just, honestly, I just believe it's sexism. And it's just the things that women are allowed to get away with versus the things that men are allowed to get away with and the standards that women are held to versus the standards that men are held to. So I definitely think that after this season, they need to really sit all the referees down to have conversations about what they're going to allow and what they aren't. And I think that wiping trash talk out of the game would be not in their best interest because trash talk is definitely a part of the game. I can understand if things get a little too crazy, but Angel and Diamond Miller, I just don't imagine that being something crazy. They're both elite trash talkers. And Diamond has also been teed up a few times, just over things that she said to players in passing. So I just think they need to have a conversation so everyone's on the same page so players can know from the start what they can and can't get away with. But some things I think they just got to let go because it's been a few times where Angel is going back and forth with players, especially like when we look at her and Alyssa Smith, where they've had to tell the refs, like, chill, like, we cool. Angel even had to do the same thing with Courtney, between her and Courtney Williams, like, yo, we cool, so yeah, they got to get that under control and get the text under control. I hope that eventually that one can be rescinded because I don't think that's worth a tech, and it's definitely not worth her being suspended. But hey, what can you do? The Sparks are on a 5-game win streak. They've knocked off the Mystics twice, the Connecticut Sun twice, but the most impressive win was over the New York Liberty, who's the number 2 team in the league. And it came down to a circus shot from Rickea Jackson. And I'm really so happy that she had this moment because there's been a lot of talk about her regressing. I actually put out a video that basically argued against her regressing. I think that she's holding pretty steady from what we've seen her accomplish in her rookie season, but now she's getting used to a completely new team. Yeah, well, not necessarily a new team, but a new system, new head coach, some new pieces with Kelsey Plum. I think that we also have to give her a little bit grace for that. Yes, it's her sophomore season, but she's in a bit of a new learning curve as she was in her rookie season, where I think that she was on limited minutes in the first place because she was in that Miller system. And I have my own opinions about that. Some of you who've been following me for a while probably already know how I feel about Kurt Miller, but that's neither here nor there because my girl scored 24 points in this win, 57% from the floor, 66% from three. That's one of her highest percentages from college and the pros. So I'm really happy to see that stat continue to improve. I think that Coach Roberts is a really great coach for her to expand from behind the arc. And then she had 3 rebounds. So it's getting to the point where Rickea is probably going to continue to trend up. I think the second half of this season is going to be really strong for the Sparks. In this game, there was also a supreme effort from De'Erica Hamby and Azurá Stevens, who had almost identical numbers. They each had 17 points, 21 rebounds between the two of them. Kelsey Plum had 20 points and 8 assists. Julie Allemon had 10 assists. And that's what I noticed from the opening minutes with that Sparks team in this win is that the ball was moving. This is the system that this is the way the ball has to move in this Coach Roberts system. And I think that this is what she's been looking for since the start of the season. It's just taking them some extra time to get it together. And you really can't blame them for that because they've been working through some injuries. They're just getting Ray Burrell back. And Ray Burrell had a big game off the bench, 12 points. And Sanaya Fagans had 6 strong minutes, 2 for 2 from the field. And they still haven't had Cam Brink. In breaking news, she was just cleared to play. So now it's about her catching up to speed and getting acclimated to the new system. But once they get Cam, that's going to be a huge spark off of the bench, all puns intended. We haven't seen Emma Cannon, and I don't even know if Emma Cannon lasts since Cam Brink is returning, and August 7th is that deadline, and they can continue to make some moves. So I'd be interested to see what the Sparks do, if they want to add or remove anything from their roster since they're looking to make that push to secure the A seed going into the playoffs, because the A seed is real. It's still wide open at this point because this season has been so up and down for everyone, you know. And before Cam, left, she played 15 games of her rookie season. She averaged 7.5 points, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks, and was 32% from three. So I think her being able to spread the floor is really perfect for this system. She might be a better 3-point shooter than De'Erica Hamby, and I think that she will be a great relief off of the bench because while she might not break this starting lineup, she doesn't really need to. Everybody doesn't have to be a starter. She may crack it next season, but for right now, her coming off of the bench will really be perfect because the Sparks don't have a lot of depth to their post play. In this game, I'm really surprised to see them take that win home because they don't have the depth. If you're comparing it to the New York Liberty, the starters had to play some really strong minutes in this win over New York. So kudos to them for even being able to pull that off. That said, Breanna Stewart exited the game in the first half due to a potential hamstring injury. Currently, she's listed as day-to-day. The injury comes right after Coach Brondello said that she wanted to monitor her minutes because Stewart has been doing so much for the team and playing these high minutes because the scheduling is crazy. You know, people try to compare it to the NBA, but you really have to consider the makeup, you know, the science behind the differences between women's bodies and men's bodies. And I started to think about, before I get into this, I just want to say, if you're a man, I don't know how you're going to feel about this conversation because I am going to bring up that thing that happens once a month for women. But just think about, in the WNBA, there's a chance that at least one player is on their menstrual cycle during a game. Now, for me, I know how much that takes on my body, like how much that changes who I am. It changes my mood. It changes really my chemical makeup. I'm a person that tore their ACL. I'm just recently going through my menstrual cycle. And that first couple of days before it even came on, I felt the change in my knee that had surgery. Like I felt like if I was if I did too much, I probably could have tore it again. And there has been more science that talks about the changes of our body when we're on our cycles. So knowing that, and then not only that, it changes my energy level. I'm more tired. I need more rest. Then I have mood changes. So to know that at least one person is probably on their cycle during a game is crazy to me. And then knowing how when women get together, our cycles change. And maybe there's more than one person on their cycle because there's this thing that we consider an alpha. And our cycles and our schedule may be impacted by the people around us. So it could be a moment where the whole team is actually on their cycle or is fluctuating where they're if they're not on their cycle, they're in the week or so before their cycle, and that's the PMS, time. So all of those things we have to take into consideration when we're dealing with women. We are just different beings, and I think that these schedules aren't taking into consideration science. They're based off of numbers with the networks. They're based off of money. And at some point, we have to be ethical about things. But reeling it back into just regular basketball, Emma Meesseman is anticipated to join the Liberty squad by August 1st. And it was last reported that they were working on her visa. So if this Breanna Stewart injury happens to be serious or a little more serious where it's going to take a couple of weeks, which it could be a pull since it was a non-contact type of injury, Emma Meesseman will hopefully fill that gap in the way that they need, because regardless, New York is stacked and it's really unfair. But moving into the MVP conversation, if you have visited my website recently, then you saw that I talked about Napheesa Collier, Alyssa Thomas, and A'ja Wilson, and I gave those stats to where I think they are in that conversation. Personally, I think that Alyssa Thomas edges out both of them because of how well-rounded her stats are. She's averaging 9.4 rebounds and 9.4 assists. That is crazy. She's nearly averaging a triple-double. And I know that the popular thing to say right now is that Napheesa Collier is MVP. And Napheesa Collier is having a great season. We can't take that away from her. She's the leading scorer in the WNBA right now. She's averaging 23 points a game across 23 games in 32.9 minutes. That is a huge stat line, but I don't think that we can ignore what Alyssa Thomas is accomplishing in Phoenix. They're also the number 3 ranked team. Now, there is no criteria for MVP. So everyone who's going to vote is going to be voting off of their own made up standards. But I think that you can factor in how well a team is performing with the player, although there have been MVPs that don't have the best team. But I think that it absolutely matters how your team is performing with you in it. How well are you able to pull this team up? Now, I don't think the team needs to be a number 1 team in order for them to be considered in the MVP conversation, but I just think that it matters how your team performs with or without you, and we can consider those things. And I think that Phoenix being number 3 has everything to do with what Alyssa Thomas is bringing. The offense runs through her. She's the engine, literally. That's the best name that anyone could come up with her, because without her, it looks pretty different. So 15 points, 9.4 rebounds and assists per game on 51.3% shooting. We're looking at Napheesa Collier. She has 23 points per game, 7.7 rebounds. She's actually the lowest rebounder amongst the 3, which is interesting for her position, but maybe it's due to the help that she has with Alana Smith and Jessica Shepard. And then she's shooting 51.9% from the floor, which is pretty, not even pretty. That's a great stat line considering that she's a 34% 3-point shooter. And if she gets her 3-point shooting up, she would be at a 50-40-90 split because her free throws are at 92.9%. She's the highest free throw percentage shooter out of the 3. And A'ja takes the most free throws out of the 3, but Napheesa Collier has the better percentage. Now, between Nafisa and A'ja is my favorite player in the league, but I think that Napheesa Collier is having a better season than A'ja. But I think Alyssa Thomas is having the better season out of all three. Now, when I made this post, people were like, how are you going to overlook Allisha Gray? I want to tell you right now, I am not overlooking Allisha Gray. I think that she is the fourth amongst this MVP conversation. But realistically, when I look at her numbers, I cannot rank her higher than the other three that I've talked about. But I do think that she will receive votes, and I do think she absolutely deserves to be in this conversation based off of her numbers this season. She's played in 24 games. She's averaging the most minutes out of the other three that I've talked about, 35 minutes. She's averaging 19 points. She's actually the highest rebounding guard in the WNBA. She's tied with Brittany Griner. In that top 20, her and Brittany Griner are both tied at 20. 5.8 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game. She's averaging 44.8% from the floor and 39% from three. So she's the better three-point shooter out of the three that we talked about. She doesn't have the highest field goal percentage, but she's shooting from a different range maybe than Asia and Alyssa. But Nafisa, it may be about the same because I feel like Nafisa has the most versatility out of the first three. Out of the top three, Napheesa Collier has the most versatility in where her shots come from. So her field goal percentage being that 51% is impressive. Napheesa Collier's field goal percentage is actually higher than Alyssa Thomas. And then she does have more versatility to her shot than anyone else in this conversation, maybe outside of Allisha Gray. So the conversation, honestly, at this point in the season, since we're halfway through, the actual winner is still wide open, right? We still have a lot of games left, but right now, I think that Alyssa Thomas is filling up the stat sheet in a different way and is more even across the board. What she's doing for Phoenix is really impressive. And I have to give it to Alyssa Thomas right now. But that's not to say that Napheesa Collier won't set herself apart, that A'ja Wilson maybe could set herself apart. It's still pretty wide open. And I just think that with the way that these three are performing, Allisha Gray is going to be a strong fourth for me, unless Atlanta just does a complete turnaround and Allisha Gray starts to perform even better than what she's already doing. But what are your thoughts? I'm really interested to see what you all feel about the MVP conversation. And is Napheesa Collier just that shoe-in for you? And if so, what makes you put Napheesa Collier over Alyssa Thomas? Because I think it's hard to argue a triple-double. It's not a triple-double yet, but we're like what is it? Like 0.6 away from being a triple double. So what makes you put Napheesa Collier over someone who's averaging those kind of stats? We have to talk about it. Now, going into one of my favorite segments of the show, who's feeding the girls? Now, I have to give it up for Saniya Rivers this week. She's actually like, I think the girls were actually starved before Saniya Rivers joined the league. She just has the ultimate style. And to find out that she doesn't have a stylist, chef's kiss. All puns intended. I just think that Saniya Rivers has one of the better styles in the WNBA. She might be the best dressed mask presenting woman in the league. And that says a lot because the girls are feeding. The mask girlies are feeding. And I'm more than likely biased. I am biased. Not even going to pretend. I'm biased towards mask presenting style because that's what I would wear. That's what I see myself in. And I think Saniya just takes the cakes. Now, moving into the big wins of this week, there've been a lot, but the common denominator have been the Seattle Storm. The Dallas Wings and the Washington Mystics both outplayed the Storm, and it's very puzzling to wrap my mind around. If you've been a follower, you know that I have Seattle as, one of those teams that is a championship contender. So to see how far they can fall from grace at times is just, I don't know. And I'm going to be honest that I haven't watched every single game because there's just so many games to watch. I'm actually going to be in Seattle this coming week, so I'm very excited to catch 2 of those games in person. The Wings loss, you can say, there was no Skylar Diggins, which is significant. But even without Skylar, I would think the Storm can be more competitive than to lose by 24 points. The trend I'm seeing in these losses is that Alicia Clark isn't scoring. And I just don't know about Alicia Clark's fit in this particular system. This is actually her lowest output since her rookie season. And we know the Alicia Clark who was in Seattle before, or the Alicia Clark who was with the Aces, is a role player that you can count on and can be really consistent. So I don't know how intentional they've been with getting her going. Like, I know that she has a goose egg, like, in those losses, and she's been missing. I mean, she's had a couple of shots, like the one against Dallas. I think she was over 2, and then the recent one, she was like 0 for 4. So she's had a couple of shots that she's missed. But I think with that kind of player, like, you just got to look for her. Again, I haven't watched as much as I want to watch. So I'm going to go back so I can really do a deep dive into what I think could be happening. Right now, Seattle is 15-11. So for those who have been able to really tune in to those last few losses and to their last few games in general, let me know what you think is going on with Seattle, because I'm very hurt by the results of these losses, because I just think that they're a better team than that. And I really have been rooting for Coach Noelle Quinn, because with everything ramping up and with us getting these, expansion teams, and with everyone in the WNBA just being pressed to win right now and for viewership because there's more eyes than ever, I think that all the coaches, in the back of their mind at least, even if it's not something that they're thinking about every day, they're in the hot seat, because we're seeing that the turnover with coaches in the W can be quick now. And so I really am rooting for Coach Quinn. I think that she has one of the best clipboards in the league. I just don't know what's going on right now. I will say that Lexi Brown, I have to shout out Lexi Brown, because we've been pretty hard on her because she hasn't been getting a lot of minutes. And when she has been getting minutes in the past, she wasn't really producing. But I think that she's had some strong minutes in the last few games, especially that loss from last night. So shout out to Lexi Brown for being a contributor, but something needs to change in Seattle, and I just don't know what right now. This week's X factor of the wins, I have to give it to Satori Walker Kimbro. She had a huge game for Atlanta in the win over Phoenix, and I'm really proud of that. She had 11 points and she shot 75% from 3. That's the type of output I know that the Atlanta front office has been looking for from her, because that's why they brought her in from Washington. That's the type of player that she was for Washington. I was really excited to have Satori Walker Kimbrough in Atlanta, because I know her ceiling is very high. And I think that in this system, she has the space that she needs, but she's been in her head. Well, it felt like to me that she's been in her head. All the mistakes that I've seen from her have been mental mistakes. And I'm just happy to see her look a lot more comfortable. And I hope that this is the start of what her trajectory is going to be for the second half of the season, because she's really important if Atlanta wants to make a deep run in the playoff. They need that type of production from her, especially with Jordan Canada stepping up, especially with Ryan Howard being out, because she's going to be out for the rest of this month. Yes, but we don't know what she looks like moving forward, because, it takes a while to get into shape, but it doesn't take long to get out of shape. So with just a couple of weeks, it may take her some time to get back up to the Ron Howard that we know her to be. Also, that win against Phoenix was really impressive, especially without Ryan, but it shows what this team is capable of. And I hope that they continue this even with Ryan, because the ball movement, the lock in on defense is just that's the Atlanta that I know that we can be. And the impact of Brittany Griner in that game, that 17-point performance, is just what we've been looking for with BG all season as well. And it's been really up and down. And she probably felt rejuvenated by going into Phoenix, and that being such a prominent part of her story, being in Phoenix and being with that crowd that still supports her so much. I know that did a lot for her spirit wise, for her energy wise, and that's part of the reason why she was willed to that type of performance. But if we can get more of that output from her, that's also going to be a huge part of Atlanta's success story. But even without, I think they have to find a balance because they know that BG is only going to be able to give you so much. I think that she is one of the players that's dealing with load management because of the injury with her toe fracture, with her kind of just not looking like herself over the last couple of years with the effort output. Or I don't want to say effort because I don't want to seem like she's like intentionally not putting in the effort, but from what she's been able to give to the game for the last couple of years, I just want us to not really always lean on BG every single game. But if we can get more of an output from Nia Coffey, if we can trust Nia Coffey more in the system, because honestly, she hasn't been able to get the minutes that she was getting in the beginning of the season. But if we can lean on other players to be explosive and then have BG for the highs that we can have her for, I think that Atlanta will just be a better team. I hope that makes sense. Heading into my coach's corner, then I want to pull a quote from Coach Becky Hammon. I've been able to talk with the Aces a few times over the last couple of games in post-game press conferences. And she said that there have been different points of the season where I felt like I needed to be hard on them. There's other points in the season, the same season, where I felt like I didn't want to critique. I just wanted to love on them. I felt like sometimes they just need to be encouraged and loved. I try to feel the pulse of the team, see what they need in the moment, and give that to them, whether that's correction or encouragement, tough love, or just plain love. And these words are significant because they hint towards things beyond the X's and O's. And basketball is a lot of that. Basketball is physical, but it's also mental on a lot of different levels. And we can talk about the X's and O's and the mishaps of the Aces all day, but I think that there is something beyond that is happening with this team because the breakdowns on defense, miscommunication, those missteps, that is just one-on-one basketball. And I'm not going to act like these players don't know what they're doing wrong. They completely understand. And I think that's what Coach is saying. Like, they understand what they're doing wrong. Now it's getting them to put in the effort and getting them to get to that place. But what is keeping them from that? They're pros. So what is keeping them from being able to lock in? Because I would attribute the loss in Indiana to stagnant offense, not a lot of ball movement. When I talked to Jackie Young, she spoke to them not playing with pace and staying in the top half of the court, not taking what the defense gives them. When the defense ramps up their pressure, they're on their heels offensively. But they know, like, all of these players on the Aces, other than Aaliyah Nye, have been in these types of positions before. So what is keeping them from that? The Aces are a better team when Jackie Young facilitates the offense. When she's passing well, they win. They're 6-1 when she has 6 or more assists, and 2-0 when she has 7 or more. So it sounds like run the offense through Jackie. Now, when I say that, we also have to look at Chelsea Gray. The 2023 season may have been Chelsea Gray's peak. And she was scoring 15 a game with 7 assists. That was the most in her career. And we saw a big drop off in 2024. We know that she was recovering from that injury, but right now she's averaging 4 assists and 3 turnovers. So the assists almost are canceled out by her turnovers. So Chelsea Gray's performance, mixed in with their miscommunications on defense and the stagnant offense. And then we have to look at the losses that they took. I have a whole breakdown on what I think was wrong with the Aces following their loss to the Mystics on July 10th. And I think that video does a great job at really explaining everything that is still true today. So the losses of Tiffany Hayes, Alicia Clark, Sydney Colson, and Kelsey Plum, those losses weren't recouped with the pickup of Jewell Loyd. And when we talk about Jewell Loyd, I think that what Coach Hammond was referring to. Now, this is just me in my opinion. I don't know this to be true, but I think a lot of that when she was mentioning you got to love on them and encourage them, I think a lot of that could be towards Jewel Lloyd and her situation because Jewel Lloyd is a player that we know can perform. But honestly, there is something going on beyond basketball that is keeping her from it. Like she's getting wide open looks. And I thought the same thing in Seattle. Like I don't know what happened between her and Seattle. She doesn't seem to have, great feelings about the organization at this point. But I don't think that and this is just outside looking in. I don't think we can blame Coach Quinn's schematics for Jewel Lloyd's performance, even in that 2024 season. I thought that she had open looks, that she was just blowing. She missed a lot of open shots in that game, in both games, in both of their recent losses against Indiana, against who was their most recent loss? The Minnesota Lynx. I think she was over 10 against Minnesota. So there is something in the way. There's something mentally blocking Jewel Lloyd, and I don't think that a coach can get that out of that. That is a personal come to Jesus that a player is going to have to get over that hump. So the Aces are dealing with a lot of things beyond X's and O's. Like, sure, we can talk about rotational things, but honestly, I think Coach Hammond has done everything. I think that she's pulled out the kitchen sink at this point. Like she's played with the rotations, even with the losses of Tiffany Hayes, Alicia Clark, Sydney Colson, Kelsey Plum. This team that they have is a team that should be able to be competitive, that should be able to play better than what they've been playing, So I don't think that we can blame the front office or coaching for this. At this point, we have to hold the players accountable. So that's where I'm at with the Aces. I don't think there's much more breaking down than I can do beyond what I've already done. It's still the same story. It's been the same story all season. And some of those same things were happening last season with Kelsey Plum presence. Kelsey Plum's loss was huge. Yes, it was. But I also think that they were still having some of these same issues with Kelsey Plum, which is why the season ended the way that it did last season. And there were a lot of highs and lows in that season as well. There were a lot of defensive breakdowns, and Coach was still saying a lot of the same things that she's saying right now. It's beyond the X's and O's. It's something mentally blocking them. That's why I hinted towards complacency in one of the episodes before that one on July 10th. So what are your thoughts on the Aces? I'm very curious to see what other people have to say and how you're feeling about the coaching, and do you think that it is the player issues, or do you think it's a combination of both? Very curious to see what you guys have to say about that. So please drop that in the comments. Now, moving on into the injury report before we wrap things up, there's a lot of players injured at this point. Paige Bueckers is out. She's resting in this upcoming matchup against the Aces. And honestly, I think that she's resting. She's just tired of this situation. She's tired of this situation because that clip of her and Haley Jones in that huddle watching Conclanis draw whatever he was drawing up, to come into the league and be that number one draft pick, it's a dream come true. And then you come to this organization and it's a complete drop off from what you've had your entire collegiate career with Gino Auriemma, arguably the best women's basketball coach of all time. And then you come in with an unexperienced coach, at least in the head coaching position. Some would say that he's unexperienced in general. I'm not here to argue that, but I know that he's unexperienced in comparison to Gino Auriemma. So to just have that contrast, I think that it's not all it's cracked up to be to being the number one draft pick. And at this point, if I was a college athlete, I don't know if I would even care about where I go in the draft, because the higher I go, it seems to be the less I'm going to receive, because you see it with Paige, you see it with Angel and Camilla. Like being a number one draft pick or being drafted in the first round isn't all it's cracked up to be, because that typically means that you're going to an organization that's getting its shit together. So you're playing your best in college, all to be rewarded with a struggle. And that is absolutely tough. So speaking of Chicago, pretty much half of Chicago's roster is on the injury report. We got Michaela Onyenwere, Haley Van Lith, Mariah Jefferson, Ariel Atkins, Angel Reese, and then of course Courtney Vandersloot, who's out for the remainder of the season. Angel Reese and Michaela Onyenwere and Haley Van Lith are all day to day, and then Mariah Jefferson and Ariel Atkins are just listed as out with an anticipated to return date for July 29th. We will see, because sometimes that gets pushed out just depending on the medical staff. And then you look at Dallas, they're dealing with injuries themselves. Maddie Siegrist is ruled out. Paige Beckers, of course. Maisha Hines-Allen ruled out. And Tyesha Harris is ruled out for the rest of the season. Golden State is probably the biggest pain in my chest for that Kayla Thornton being out for the rest of the season after having just the season of her career, one of the best seasons of any other player in the W. She was just having a standout year, and it's really disheartening to see her go down in that fashion. And then Monique Billings is also out until July 29th. And then we have Caitlin Clark, who's out with a growing injury. We don't have a timetable for her return. It was last reported that she was receiving a second opinion, and I think that's wise of her to do, because I don't think that she was getting the right information from the Indiana Fever. And if you follow me, then you already know my opinions on that, so I won't get deep into the weeds with that. But Caitlin Clark is out with no timetable. Cheyenne Parker-Tyus did give us an update, and she's looking to come back before the playoffs, so by September 4th. After dropping the load, she's had her baby and she's looking to come back. Cam Brink is looking to be back by July 29th. Carly Samuelson is, of course, out for the rest of the season. Brianna Stewart is still day to day. Niara Sabley is been out for rest. It's been conflicting information, because it's saying that she's out for rest, but then it's also been saying that she's out for a leg or knee thing. And then Emma Meeseman is out until August 1st, and they've been attempting to secure her visa. And then, of course, Katie Lou Samuelson is out for the rest of the season. Aaliyah Edwards has been day-to-day with a wrist injury. Sika Cohn's contract was temporarily suspended, and it's estimated for her to return by August 8th. And then, of course, Georgia Amore is out for the rest of the season. Now, as we wrap up, I just want to encourage all of you to sign up for my mailing list on www.womensbasketball365.com. It's really a treat if you're a reader. I put out a lot of different articles throughout the week, and I won't spam you with messages. I feel like I send a healthy amount of emails, and they're very intentional and relevant to what's happening in the W. So if you're a reader and you want to get the latest updates and you want to get those updates in real time, please subscribe to my mailing list. Make sure to follow me on X, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. You can follow me at Cassie Chantel, and then also at WBB.365. I'll be in Seattle this week, so I'm hoping to link up with some of the Hoops Tribe then. As always, folks, let's talk hoops.